right, we're going to continue talking about life preserver Jesus and the St. Joseph Baltimore Catechism, everybody's favorite book. And we're in lesson 15, where it talks about the two great commandments, loving God. And under loving God, you got here two pictures right here at the top, where it says, and I can't even see with the glare, but it says that marrying somebody here, that is good. But then choosing Christ as your spouse, that is said to be better. And they have 1 Corinthians 7:32 through 34 for that. Well, they didn't happen to read the first part of the chapter, which says if it's better to marry than to burn, if you cannot contain, that you better get married. So I don't see choosing Christ as my spouse. I mean, good idea, but only if you're not going to burn. Paul also says in Timothy that I would that the younger widows get remarried, because when they wax wanton against Christ, they will depart from the faith. So, but they think you should be chaste. And Paul also tells Timothy that one of the things that they do when they have in 1 Timothy 4, verse 3, some of the things they do following seducing spirits and doctrines of devils is forbidding to marry. And that's what they're doing, forbidding to marry, the Catholic Church, following seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Then we get to lesson 16, the first commandment of God, which they say is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. What they've done is, the Bible says, the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. But they change it to strange gods, so then that way they can have their little idols that they bow down to. And I think this is funny because they got these pictures here. The first one is the first commandment of God commands worship of God, but it forbids false worship. And I want to know what the difference is in these pictures here. First, you've got the worship of God with this guy. He's holding looks like to be a mirror in front of his face, and somehow that's the worship of God. But then this other picture, you've got this woman going to a fortune teller, and that's false worship. Well, I don't know what difference that is really when you think about it. Either one, they're in front of some glass that they're looking at. It's just one is supposedly the worship of God. What does this picture here, this guy holding this mirror, what does that have to do with the worship of God? And how is that any different from this woman going to this fortune teller, and that's considered the false worship of God? I don't understand the difference there. Then they've got at the bottom this picture of this guy, and it says, this is wrong. He's bowing down to a Buddha. And so they show that, and they say, oh, this is wrong. Well, if you look at the Buddha, he's got his hand up, and he's got the same pose that you normally see from a Mary statue. So it's very similar to what the Catholics already have in their services with the worship of Mary. But if we call him Buddha and not Mary, that's bad. But if we call him Mary, that's somehow good. So I thought that was funny. So then we go on with the first commandment of God. How does a Catholic sin against faith? A Catholic sins against faith by apostasy, heresy, indifferentism, and by taking part in non-Catholic worship. So I guess the worship of God really is, if I look at this mirror, I'm okay because that's a Catholic doing it. But if I was to worship in, say, a Baptist church, according to the Catholics, I've sinned against the faith. A Catholic sins against faith by taking part in non-Catholic worship when he intends to identify himself with a religion he knows is defective. Well, by that definition, then, by being a Catholic, I'm sinning against the faith because I know that the Catholic religion is defective. So they just contradicted themselves here. A person sins by presumption when he trusts that he can be saved by his own efforts without God's help, or by God's help without his own efforts. What? So I have to so Christ's work on the cross didn't save you. That's not enough to save me. I've got to have my own efforts. And I sin by presumption when I think that I am just saved by grace. Say that, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So when I believe Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, according to the Catholics, I'm committing the sin of presumption, because I think that I can be saved by God's help without my own efforts. I'm just dumb enough to believe the Bible. How dare I do that? Besides the sins against faith, hope, and charity, the first commandment forbids also superstition and sacrilege. What's superstition? I'm glad you asked that. A person sins by superstition when he attributes to a creature a power that belongs to God alone, as when he makes use of charms or spells, believes in dreams or fortune-telling, or goes to spiritists. Well, isn't that what the Catholics do? If I go to a Catholic priest who takes ordinary wine and bread, and by blessing it, it turns into the literal body and blood of Christ, isn't that going to a spiritist or using a charm or spell? Yeah, when he does the little, yeah.
Or when they swear up and down that a statue of Mary cried blood, tears, blood running down her face. Oh my gosh, let's worship that statue. Or you see Jesus' face in a grilled cheese sandwich. Grilled cheese. I made myself hungry now.
But that's not a sin by superstition. It doesn't make any sense.